Hello, and welcome to HORRORific Tales. In this show, we like to celebrate the creations of independent authors and aspiring writers. Please like, subscribe, and share these videos to help get our friends as much exposure as possible. We'd also appreciate it if you could support our artists by following them on their independent platforms and by purchasing their works. Details on how to do so will be in the show notes. On this episode, we'll be reading to Twisted Tales, Dripping Honey by Brianna Malotke. Clever and cunning, Malia knew how to act the part of the damsel in distress. In everyday life, she was often looked down on, but here, in the moment, dressed to the nines and sitting alone in the bar, she was elegance embodied. Clad in cognac satin that hugged her curves, her dark brown hair was curled and hung loose among her exposed shoulders. She had done her makeup in a way that would hopefully hide her true intentions in the dimly lit, crowded bar. For tonight, she had chosen the lipstick shade Cherry Blossom, hoping that the pinkish tint it provided highlighted her sensuous lips enough to be distracting while she spoke. Devious in her ways, she waited. The music alternated between classic rock and current pop hits. She found it to be an unusual combination, but it allowed her mind to drift while she sat at the bar. Stirring her cherry in her now almost empty drink, she watched the ice cubes slowly melt as she stirred. She waited patiently, of course, for her next victim to appear. Growing up, she learned that trust, while it was something that should have been earned, was merely something that could be easily manipulated and twisted to fit her needs. As the stranger sat down next to her and offered to buy her another round, the music seemed to disappear. Malia turned her focus on him. The dim lights in the bar offered her the ability to cloud herself, but it also allowed her to focus on him without appearing off or too intense. Most of the guys that hit on her in these types of bars could be classified as the tall, dark, and handsome stereotypical drool-worthy type of guy. This guy, Luke, was no exception. He was relatively tall, maybe slightly over 6 feet tall, with dark hair that had that messy but was an actual styled look. She could see tattoos peeking out from under his jacket sleeves. She smiled and nodded along as he started to tell her about himself. Malia had years of patience. She knew when to lightly brush an arm or gently touch his hand. She knew when to take a slow sip from her drink and exactly how much she needed to disclose about herself to make him interested. She hadn't even finished her drink when she knew he was trapped, like flies drowning in honey, hanging on every word that came from her mouth. As someone who could hold their liquor, Malia knew it took more than just a couple of cocktails to inhibit her actions, but nonetheless, she declined a third drink. She opened her clutch, filling the 2 lipstick cases within, and choosing the appropriate one, she pulled out her color of the evening. Luke looked a little defeated, and as she reapplied her cherry blossom lipstick, careful to take her time and soak up his full attention, she told him it may be time for her to head home. Playing the role of the gentleman so well, he offered to drive her home, for her safety, of course. After she put her lipstick away, closed her clutch, and placed her hand on his knee, she agreed that it would be lovely to have a ride home. While insinuating the potential for going somewhere a little more intimate, Malia knew Luke wouldn't be making it home tonight. She flashed him a smile and hoped it wasn't too wide, like a lioness eager to devour her prey once they were all alone. The 2 of them headed out of the bar and he held the door open for her as he helped her into his car. Once he was behind the wheel, he asked for her address or general directions to her neighborhood. She gave him a rough idea of the neighborhood where she lived. However, like everything else she disclosed to the world, it was a lie, and she held her true intentions close to her chest. He played his role so well. Malia thought this might be the best evening yet. He was calm and collected, but when she recommended a moonlit stroll in a nearby wooded area, he was all too willing to deviate from the original plan of safely taking her home. They pulled off at the next exit, and after a little distance down a mostly dirt and gravel road, he parked his car on the side. She slid easily out of the leather seat and beat him to opening her door. Trying to mask her eagerness for her true intentions, she hoped it appeared like she was just happy for some fresh air. The moonlight was highlighting her curves more than the bar's casual atmosphere lighting had, making the satin dress she chose an even more perfect decision she had made. The proof was in the quick way Luke took her hand and led her to a nearby path. The crisp autumn air was chilly, but she was warm from the alcohol still in her system. Luke had been telling her something. She wasn't really listening and had been nodding along. She licked her cherry blossom lips, growing impatient. Malia was judging how far from the car they really were and if it was just enough that his body wouldn't be quickly discovered. Finally, they were in a good spot. They were in a little clearing surrounded by some dense, larger trees. She had him make himself comfortable while claiming she had to touch up her lipstick. As he was settling onto the ground, his back against the tree, she had pulled her second lipstick tube out of her clutch. It was almost identical to the other tube, but with one rather sharp difference. He wasn't paying attention to her movements, but to her lips as she strung along some tender and loving words, matching his role of an eager lover. He asked her how often she did something like this, and she told him she didn't like to kiss and tell. She lovingly stroked his face and whispered to him to close his eyes. Then she twisted the lipstick tube, the concealed blade glinting in the moonlight. With a gentle kiss on the cheek, leaving just a hint of cherry blossom on his skin, she stabbed him in the abdomen and pulled up quickly and forcefully. This was not her first kill. She had plenty of practice to perfect her methods. Her 3-inch blade had proven very efficient over the years. A slashed throat sprayed too much, covering one in blood and leading to a difficult way to get home without making a mess. But an abdominal and chest wound, effective and not as messy. Malia watched as his eyes were frozen open in terror, the pounding of his heart only pushing more and more blood out of the wound. She held him in place, knowing he had no energy to struggle. As he was bleeding out, pleading her to help, she smiled and let the character she had been playing roll off her. In these precious moments, she could be her true self. Malia's muscles relaxed, and her body felt at ease as Luke's was perishing in front of her eyes. Her smile, now natural and unforced, was the last thing he saw as the life drained from him. Under the moonlight, his blood took a dark barn red hue, with a more vibrant appearance on the blade she held in her hands. What a lovely shade of red, nothing like her evening's lipstick selection. She would have to remember to look for a good match the next time she went shopping. She was careful, as always, not to make a fuss of the area. But she took pleasure in these peaceful moments, just her and her freshly killed bow, soaking in the evening stillness. Malia gave herself some time, but she knew she couldn't stay too long since it had already been a couple of hours since they had left the bar. And so, she gently wiped off the blade using sanitizing wipes from her clutch and put everything potentially incriminating in a Ziploc in her bag. Easy peasy cleanup. She pulled out a pair of leather gloves and walked back to his car. She was careful not to touch anything else along her way. She knew the area well and turned back the way they came, heading to the bar. She parked his car away from the others and then got in her car to go to a more popular bar about a mile away. She took this time to go over the evening, flipping through her memories to determine what worked exceptionally well and see if there were any areas she could improve on. Once she made it to the bar scene, she noticed it wasn't even midnight yet. Perfect time for another drink. She pulled a jacket out of her trunk, double-checked everything was in order, and she didn't look like she had just spent time in the woods. Malia headed into the bar and headed straight to the counter to order a drink. She was sure to make idle chit-chat, just enough to be memorable, but nothing extra. After nursing a rum and coke, extra on the coke, for a little bit, she noted the time and said her goodbyes to the work staff. She settled in for a drive home. Checking the mirror, she noted her lipstick was just a little smudged. However, there was no need to reapply. There was no one around. Next time, she'd swap out the cherry blossom for a more vibrant red, like Luke's blood had been earlier that evening. She gave it a few weeks before trying her hand at seducing someone like Luke again. Malia had gone about her daily life, balancing her lies and over-embellished stories with ease. Telling tales was natural to her. It always had been. When she was noticed by others, her petite frame had allowed her to assume a role of the dismissive damsel, someone who needs help and assistance. But it was all just a front, just one of her many elaborate deceptions she had used over the years. People often disregarded her presence, which allowed her to be a wallflower and absorb information on others around her, especially at work. However, when she was out on her own mission, she could capture all the attention she needed. She had tried a few different shades of red since her night with Luke: deep carmine, English vermilion, uncensored, and poppy. But none had made her feel truly exquisite. She was fixated on replicating that dark but vibrant red. Her hunt would continue. She needed the absolute perfect shade for herself. Tonight, she was wearing a classic, scarlet lip paired with a strapless champagne-colored dress that highlighted her features. It may have been a different bar in a different area of town, but underneath it all, her ruse had all the same bones. Malia sat at the bar, away from others, toeing the line between being a fly on the wall and standing out. She sipped on her rum and coke, pushed her dark curls back, and surveyed the crowd. The bar was decently crowded, which would allow her to slip away unnoticed when she needed to leave. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, the ideal setting she'd be unable to create alone. The music drifted in and out of her mind as she tried to remain calm and collected while the minutes ticked by. Her skillfully crafted plans were about to diminish when someone just her type came up to the bar. The curtains were up. It was her time to shine. Her virtues may be on the sinister side, but her methods, and herself too, were refined. She asked if he had the time, and with a simple reply and smile, she knew he was enthralled by her. She was chatty and laughed at all the right times. His name was Will. He had suffered a long day at work and happened to live nearby. Malia kept her eye rolled to herself and knew that underneath his appearance he may be just what she needed this evening. Will ran a hand softly through her hair to brush a stray curl out of her face, and with a cocky smile asked if she'd like to have another drink with him, but in a more private setting. She licked her scarlet-clad lips and agreed to be chauffeured away for another, more intimate round of drinks. Will held the door for her and leaned in to whisper that he loved her dress. Malia could smell the whiskey on him mixed with some type of wood smoke cologne. The backless numbers she picked out for the evening had worked as a charm. A warm hand on her lower back reassured that. They headed out to the undisclosed location Will had in mind. However, once they were in an area Malia knew well of, she suggested a nice evening stroll. Will, too mesmerized by her charms, agreed and pulled over to where she pointed. Before exiting the car, she reapplied her lipstick, thinking that maybe this day's lipstick was the one for her. After all, this evening was looking promising. It didn't take long. In fact, the whole trip from the car to her kill was under 2 hours. They had exchanged whispered promises of what would happen that evening, but like everything else, hers were lies. Malia had used her small lipstick knife, which had been pocketed back at the car, so she had quick and easy access to it at a moment's notice. She wasn't sure what he had been trying to say to her as he bled out, but whether it was choking on his own blood or simply blood loss, his death came swiftly enough. She left Will propped up against a tree. The woods his graveyard now, and headed back towards the road to go home. The calming effect of Will's death lingered in her muscles for a few days. She smiled when needed and held polite conversation with others at work. Keeping up her facade was simple, but time took a toll on her deviant soul. Soon she started to feel like she needed another release. Another evening to let her real self out and relish in those blissful moments the malevolent actions gave her. Dressed in a tight black velvet dress, with loose long sleeves and a low-cut front, she hoped her new currant-colored lipstick stood out drastically against her ensemble. She wore her hair loose, allowing the curls in her sleeves to punctuate her movements, while the snugness of the dress showcased her natural curves. A black satin clutch and matching heels completed her ensemble. Damsel in distress or femme fatale? Malia pondered as she did a little turn in front of her mirror, soaking in her full look. She double-checked she had her 2 lipstick tubes in her clutch, along with the necessary other supplies, and voila, she was ready to go on the hunt. Trust was weakness Malia consciously chose to exploit. On tonight's menu was a man who had introduced himself as Bennett, claiming that his name meant blessed and how she would be so blessed by spending the evening with him. She gagged mentally, but plastered a smile on her face in hopes that she was masking her true feelings well. She may have years of practice, but every now and then someone had something really dumb to say, and she felt put to the test. Cunning and cute, she stayed on target. She laughed at his implications and tenderly stroked his arm. Bennett's sweater was soft under her skin, maybe an actual cashmere sweater. What a shame to ruin it with bloodstains, she thought to herself. Sometimes her face ached from all the fake smiling, but it was her top weapon in her arsenal. She sipped her wine, letting her thoughts drift in and out of the actual conversation. Malia decided Bennett liked to talk about himself a bit too much. His voice was deep and could be considered seductive in tone, but he was like white noise to her, as she only cared about what was under his sweater. After a couple glasses of Cabernet and way too much one-sided conversation, she asked him if she thought the bar was a little too loud and crowded. His eyes seemed to sparkle in anticipation at the chance to go somewhere private. Malia took his hand in hers and started to lead them out from the busy bar area and towards the door. The evening was on the warm side for the season, and so she suggested driving him to an area she knew had a beach where they could go for a dip. She was hoping his brain would keep him entertained with thoughts of their naked bodies entangled together while she focused on her true intentions for leading him to the wooded area. Bennett was all too eager to leave the car once she pulled off near a park entryway. She pocketed a lipstick tube as he started towards the park's entry. They didn't take a designated path, but a side trail that only she knew. Malia kissed his cheek, took his hand, and told him she knew a shortcut to the secluded beach. Bennett hung on her every word, her every move. She knew he was captivated by her words and the actions she was promising. Once there, just before they reached the sandy beach, she told Bennett they should stop for a moment. He was talking too much for her taste. She kissed him with all the fake passion she had as his hands wandered across the velvet between them. His eyes closed while she kissed him, keeping his mind and mouth occupied. She let one hand wander, feeling the fine cashmere wool sweater and musculature underneath. While keeping Bennett fully confined to this pleasurable moment for him, she twisted out her hidden weapon. One hand wielding the small blade, while the other made sure he was blissfully unaware of what was going to happen to him. In a swift moment, Bennett's life came to an end. Malia had stabbed his abdomen, pulled upwards, leaving his blood to come rushing out. After all, she knew abdominal organs bled profusely. In a panic, he started to thrash and scream, but she dug the knife in again and held her other hand against his mouth. This was turning out to be messier than the others, but she was thankful for her black dress and the dark cover of the waning moon. Bennett's body stilled underneath her. After several wounds, it hadn't taken very long for his punctured organs to lose just a tad too much blood. The fresh blood was warm on her hands, and under the night sky it looked darker than any wine she had ever tasted. What a lovely shade it could be in the daylight, she mused. It had taken Malia years of practice, but her current methods worked wonders for her timing. Smiling at his lifeless body, Malia got up, pocketed her weapon, and savored this moment. She felt powerful in her deceitful ways. She would remember this evening. Malia nodded as if she had spectators surrounding her and headed home. It was a decent drive from where she had left Bennett to her home. When she arrived home, she felt as if this evening had been an extra messy. Malia had wiped her hands off when she had returned to her car, but other than that, she figured blood would come out in the wash. She was usually very well put together and never had to worry about bringing home her hobby's aftermath, but the evening's activities had been a little more bloody than usual. You think with her extensive track record, she wouldn't have to worry about her clothes or heels getting bloodstained. This evening had felt special though, and so she figured it wouldn't hurt to take a few extra precautions. After taking off her heels, Malia carried them into her bedroom. She put them in a box in her closet, leaving them for a thorough cleanup for the next day. As she unzipped her dress, she headed to the bathroom. She turned the shower on and tossed her clothing in the hamper. She felt her naked body start to relax with the rising temperature in the bathroom. Staring in the mirror, she realized she had just a smidge of blood on her bottom lip. She hadn't looked in the mirror since she had touched up her lipstick earlier that evening. It couldn't be her blood, though. She didn't feel any pain. Enchanted by the look, she put a finger to her lips, careful not to remove the blood, but instead, she took her time to smear the blood to cover her lips, like lipstick. Oh, what a wonderful shade of red, this warm, rich Merlot, she thought. In that moment, staring at her reflection, her lips stained with fresh blood, Malia knew she had found her color. Her color was literally blood red. It was flawless. No wonder there's something so sultry and divine about a woman who wears a daring red lip. This would be her signature red, the shade she would wear forever moving forward. She smiled at herself in the mirror now. She knew there was a popular saying that there was a shade of red perfect for each and every woman. Her smile grew wider as she accepted that her shade happened to be the fresh blood from a man bleeding to death. And with that thought, her grin twisting into something more wicked, she knew she'd never have to worry about her shade being discontinued. She would have an unlimited supply. And herself too. Well, we hope you enjoyed our latest horrific tale. If you'd like to keep up to date, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. Also, follow us on our social media pages. You can also show your support for the channel by going to our merchandise store, picking up some items there. Please also take a moment to support our contributing friends who kindly lend their talents to this show. Check out the links in the description as to how you can do this. Until next time, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.